الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome to Islamic Oasis Online. Today's discussion is a very serious one, serious in almost every way possible. It's a discussion about respect, dignity, honor of a Muslim woman. It's about sovereignty of Muslim countries. In many ways, still are also talking about the traitor rulers who have made so much that was thought impossible possible nowadays. Meaning, as Muslims, that we never thought that certain things can happen to Muslim women, and it's happening. Whether it's rendition, whether it's kidnapping, whether it's people being picked up because they are against colonization or occupation of the Muslim lands, or journalists. If you've also seen, maybe recently there was another journalist that was killed in Kenya, just because people power at B can do it, they're doing it. So today, inshallah, the discussion is about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. Many of you, at least those who are aware of what's happening in the Muslim world, what's happening in Southeast Asia or Pakistan. Pakistan has been in the news for the last few weeks regarding the issue with Pakistan situation, Imran Khan and all of this. But Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, her imprisonment of 86 years now here in the US, obviously is making headlines. The family was just recently here. Her sister, Fawzia Siddiqui, or Dr. Fawzia Siddiqui, was here. She gave a talk, epic, in Dallas. I think also a senator, I'm forgetting his name, he was here, and they were talking about the role of, what the Muslims should do and the role of the government of Pakistan. So, inshallah, to talk about this, we have our brother Muhammed Atif, who's a journalist who has written many pieces in different newspapers that are very well known. I'm sure you've heard of the Asia Times, for instance, Dawn newspaper, the Business Recorder, and the Frontier, amongst many other newspapers. These are very well known, at least English newspapers in Pakistan, like, for instance, Dawn. So obviously read by many well-to-do people in Pakistan, the elite of Pakistan, and those who are educated, because if you can read and write English, you're reading these type of newspapers. So inshallah, to discuss this issue, what is going on? What is the actual story? What has happened? I would like to welcome Brother Muhammad Atif. Brother Muhammad, welcome to Islamic Oasis. How are you doing?
Well, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well as well. Jazakallah khair.
You can just say Brother Shirazi, Sheikh. It's not a problem. So
No,
let's get to this situation, Sheikh. As you know, just recently, Dr. Aafia Siddiqi's sister was here. She also gave a talk here in Epic in Dallas regarding what has happened in the last, since 2009, even if you want to go as far as back as that. What is the story of Aafia Siddiqui? In what circumstances has all of this happened? And if you
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Shirazi. I think it's a very important question to understand the background and the context in what has happened to Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. So this was a young lady who was born and raised in Pakistan. Then she traveled to the US. She studied as a neuroscientist. She obtained a PhD whilst in the US, and then she went back to Pakistan. And then she was allegedly involved in terrorism with Al-Qaeda. And then she was subsequently arrested and abducted in Afghanistan. And at first, the Pakistani government denied that was actually true. And then eventually, she somehow emerged, and she was eventually transported here to the US, where she was put on trial on various charges, including attempting to kill a US soldier in Afghanistan, and she was convicted and sentenced to a prison sentence of 86 years, which she's now serving in a supermax prison in Texas. So it is a story which is full of intrigue. It's full of tragedy for Dr. Aafia Siddiqui herself, and indeed her family as well. But her, her situation actually raises broader questions, not just for her family and for Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, but indeed for the Muslims in Pakistan and indeed the wider international community, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. And it's something that does need to be carefully scrutinized and looked at to raise awareness on the plight of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and the circumstances surrounding her incarceration.
Okay, so what's interesting is that during her lecture, her sister's lecture, she said it's very important that the Muslims, especially of Pakistan, create some type of awareness or pressure Pakistan's government to supposedly the ball is in the court of Pakistan. If Pakistan agrees or something like this, they are willing to, at least according to what supposedly what the lawyer is saying, is that if Pakistan agrees to some type of a swap, they are willing to do this.
Well, I mean, that's very convenient, isn't it, really? The Pakistani government supposedly has to make a deal with the US government. Let's put this in context, right? So the Pakistani government, which is dependent upon American aid, IMF loans, it's really going to put pressure on the American government to release Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. I think that's a nice narrative which suits the American government to put the onus on the Pakistani government. We all know that's not going to happen. And the Pakistani government or the Pakistani regime over the years has not actually served, when we look at its role, we need to understand the context and background. This is a regime, a government which has fully participated in the American war on terror, which spread to Pakistan, the tribal areas. It abducted many people. It transported them, gave them to the US in exchange for bounties. General Pervez Musharraf, in his book, explicitly declared that we handed over many suspects in exchange for dollars, thousands of dollars, as he put it. So are we now really relying on the consciousness of the Pakistani regime now to suddenly redeem itself and to somehow free Dr. Aafia Siddiqui? I think this is a convenient narrative which suits the US government to try to deflect blame away from itself. The truth is that the American government itself has abducted not just Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, but many hundreds, if not thousands, of Muslims around the world since it began the US war on terror under George W. Bush, all the way back in 2001. It's been involved in torture, in extraordinary rendition. We know Guantanamo Bay is still open. It still has many people who still haven't been charged, who have been held without trial. So this is actually a much broader issue than beyond Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and the Pakistani regime. This is an issue about how the American government views Muslims and how it's treated many Muslims over the past 20 years or so. And the Pakistani regime is complicit in that. We don't expect anything from the Pakistani regime.
Of course, we have had many ex-Guantanamo prisoners here on the show. We had Muazzam Beg here, our brother. We had another brother who's now even written a book on this, exactly what has happened there. So, I mean, and many of them, when you discuss with them, they say, look, we were picked up for money. I exchanged for money, sometimes just a few dollars. They were talking about how many, so many prisoners that are there in Guantanamo literally they were sold just for dollars. People just gave names and said, oh yeah, so-and-so belongs to Al-Qaeda, so-and-so belongs to this thing. But let me ask you this. What do we know about Sister Aafia? Why was she in Ghazni? I mean, she was in Ghazni in Afghanistan when she was picked up.
Well, I think the circumstances are murky, to say the least. I mean, she was alleged to have been an Al-Qaeda supporter, financier. But, this is coming from the US government. This is coming from the Pakistani government. I mean, when they've incarcerated people in Guantanamo Bay without any evidence, it's very difficult to believe the American version. I'm not saying that may not be true. But what I'm saying is that we have to question the credibility of the accuser here. This is a government, this is a regime, the American regime, where it's happy to maintain ties with some of the worst regimes in the world, including the Pakistani regime, which is
now
more than happy
with Assad. They're sitting and
with
guys killed over 500,000 people.
With the Saudi regime, for example, these are all brutal regimes who will torture and the Saudi regime, Jamal Khashoggi, we saw what happened. Quite literally, they chopped him up and liquidated that political opponent. So the American government is comfortable dealing with these regimes. So the talk of human rights on one hand against the practical realities of what we actually observe and see, we can't reconcile these. So as far as Dr. Aafia Siddiqui is concerned, the American government has made allegations, but it's very difficult to accept those when it's acting as the judge, jury, and executioner in the case of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. The Pakistani government, which should be standing up for its citizen, quite literally has handed over Dr. Aafia Siddiqui for most probably dollars. And this is the sad fact that, unfortunately, in this war on terror, it became a very lucrative industry for many inside Pakistan. We had the supply lines from Pakistan running to Afghanistan. Again, there were many people involved within the army, within government, who had lucrative contracts, lucrative deals. They made a lot of money out of this. Some of these men became very rich men through the war on terror. And Dr. Aafia Siddiqui was one person amongst those. So I think we have to treat these allegations very skeptically. I think there needs to be an independent investigation into the context, into the background. And certainly I wouldn't believe what the Americans say and what the Pakistani regime says. I wouldn't believe them. These are the people who have given us Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay at the end of the day.
Okay, here's the thing. So, I've been to Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan twice after the Taliban came into power. I got to see where some of these prisons were. I didn't go inside, but we drove by them, going to different projects and things like this. These were not easy places, Sheikh. And people were kept in cages. People were kept in for years on end. Now, here's what the newspaper says. This is the Guardian newspaper, or at least, yes, this is the Guardian. It says someone, basically, someone who's graduated from MIT, someone who's gone to Brandeis University, whether this extraordinary scene, and the scene that they're talking about is what happened. Basically, the woman was standing there. Let me read this thing here. It says, Afghan police accused the mysterious pair of being suicide bombers. What interested the Americans, though, was what they were carrying notes about a mass casualty attack in the U.S. on target, including the Statue of Liberty and collection of jars and bottles containing chemical and gel substances. Then it says, at the town police station, the Americans were directed into a room where unknown to them, the woman was waiting behind a long yellow curtain. One soldier sat down, laying his M4 rifle by his foot next to the curtain. Moments later, it twitched back. The woman was standing there, pointing the officer's gun at his head. A translator lunged at her, but it was too late. She fired twice, shouting, "Get the beep out of here!" and then Allahu Akbar. Nobody was hit. As the translator wrestled with the woman, the second soldier drew his pistol and fired, hitting her in the abdomen. She went down, still kicking and shouting that she wanted to kill Americans. Then she passed out. Now it says, whether this extraordinary scene is fiction or reality will soon be decided thousands of miles from Ghazni in Manhattan courtrooms. Now you're talking about a woman who is maybe 5'5". Allah knows what she weighs, basically wrestling down American soldiers. Is this fantasy?
Well, you see, this is the problem. You see, these are assertions by the U.S. government. Yes. So, the U.S. government has
fully armed soldiers can't handle a little woman like this. They have to shoot her, and then she passes out. Then they bring this hospital guy, and then they take her over there, and then they fly her from Afghanistan to United States in a special. What's going on, Sheikh?
Let's look at the circumstances in a little bit more detail. So, we have a Pakistani citizen who's been abducted, who was held in Bagram, a notorious prison, as you point out, where torture, rape is probably, is well known that these things.
What she said, let me tell you what she said. She said that when, at least her sister was saying in the speech that she gave, was that she's been held in, of course, woman section of the prison. She's in what do you call that? Confinement. Solitary confinement. But she was saying that, of course, here you have women who are lesbians and all of this. So there is no safe place for her. That's what she was saying, that there is no safe place. Just
Well,
because I'm not amongst men doesn't mean that rape does not happen.
well, she's talking about her current situation in
Yes,
America.
yes.
And the point is that this was, remember, this was happening at the height of the war on
Right.
terror, when the Americans had occupied Afghanistan. The Taliban had been toppled, and the Americans were empowering warlords throughout Afghanistan as part of Hamid Karzai's government initially, to try to occupy the country. That's the context. Let's not forget that. So when a Pakistani citizen is abducted from Afghanistan, disappears, and then eventually turns up in America, the American government has some explaining to do to the rest of the world. So, you know, it has every motive to try to paint a picture of somebody who allegedly tried shooting an American soldier. As you point out, you know, a small woman with a small physique, she, you know, somehow managed to obtain a rifle, and she managed to fire off these rounds. The point is that I don't trust the American government. I don't think many people trust the American government. And when we look at the evidence of what the Americans have actually done, the abuses that have been carried out, the executions, the war in Afghanistan, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, Bagram, you know, I think there would be very few takers for that American version of that narrative there. And that's the actual, you know, that's the troubling part of this whole saga, this whole story, that, you know, this is just the American version who are acting as the judge, jury, and executioner in Dr. Aafia Siddiqui's case.
Sheikh, I mean, if these guys can hide, okay, so you're saying that, okay, she, obviously they knew where she was. According to them, it says here, the truth of the matter, he said, I mean, I guess the newspaper that they're talking to different people, he said, was that Siddiqui had never been sent to Bagram. Instead, she spent the 5 years on the run, living clandestinely with her 3 children under the watchful eye of the Pakistani intelligence. He told me they shifted between Quetta in Balochistan province, Iran, and the Karachi house. I had visited earlier that day. It was a striking explanation. When I asked for proof, he started at the beginning. Their parents, and then he goes on to what actually, you know, some of the stories in their lives. But Sheikh, when we say, even when we talk about ISI, are we always talking about CIA here?
Well, the ISI is the premier intelligence organization in Pakistan, and the ISI has a long history of collaborating with the American government, particularly with the CIA. Let's not forget that they helped arm what they now call the Afghani terrorists. They were called the Mujahideen at one point, when they were fighting the Soviets, the Russians, and Afghanistan. So the ISI go back a long way with the CIA. They know that territory, they know that region, and so they've worked with each other. So again, the ISI have their own motives and their own interests at play here. There is no independent examination of these facts. We just have to look at the political situation in Pakistan today and see what's happening. We see with Imran Khan's political party, many activists who have been picked up and incarcerated, and we see the forced abduction and the arrest of his members of his political party. So we know that the Pakistani army, the Pakistani regime, are very capable of twisting the narrative, changing the narrative, and asserting.
I've heard there is now also raping of the woman. Also, many of them are being taken to Balochistan jails in Balochistan. So obviously, go ahead. I just wanted to mention that.
Yes,
this is coming out of their newspapers.
Yes, these are serious allegations. I don't know whether that is true. What the truth is.
Well, this is from the Indian side. Indian newspapers are saying that the crackdown was so severe that, and even some Pakistani journalists who are in Washington are saying the same thing, that many of the accused party members, PTI, have been taken to Balochistan, and women have really been dealt with very hard.
These are serious allegations, and they merit an investigation in their own right. But the point is that the Pakistani army leadership, it controls a lot of what goes in Pakistan, certainly politically, and it's now flexing its muscle against the PTI and Imran Khan's party. I'm not a supporter of Imran Khan. I'm not a supporter of PTI. I don't agree with their methodology and participation in the democratic system in Pakistan. I think they've now realized the hard way that you cannot bring genuine change through the system in Pakistan.
Hmm.
But what I am saying here is that the way they are being treated, the way they're being dealt with, demonstrate that the army and the ISI in particular, they have a very strong hold on the political situation in Pakistan. And it's very telling that where are the denunciations from the Americans as to what's actually going on in Pakistan? There's almost a deafening silence actually from Washington, even from London as well. So we can see that when it suits America's political interest, it will play along with the Pakistani regime. And likewise, when it suits the Pakistani regime, they will play along with Washington. So coming back to Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and these allegations which have been made by the Pakistani regime and the American government, it suits their narrative to make these allegations, to work with one another, because it's not just Dr. Aafia Siddiqui we're talking about. We're talking about people like Mozambique, who was also picked up and abducted and extradited from Pakistan, or rendition from Pakistan, should I say. Many others have been picked up and sold for thousands of dollars. So there's actually a lot.
And if these people were not in Guantanamo, we would not have known actually where Dr. Aafia was, because I think he was one of the ones who had pointed out that she is in Guantanamo, because they could actually hear her screaming while she was being tortured.
Well, this is the thing. This is what we only know of. We don't know, Allahu Alam, what has really happened. The extraordinary rendition sites were operating in Syria, in Romania, in Lithuania, in Poland. These are just some of the countries I'm just naming where these black sites in North Africa, in Morocco, and in Pakistan as well, of course. So these regimes have cooperated with the American governments in illegally abducting people from across the world and extraditing them, or jailing them, or torturing them, or incarcerating them in places like Guantanamo Bay. There is no sane person should believe what the American government, or indeed the Pakistani regime, says, and that would stand true for Dr. Aafia Siddiqui as well.
So, Sheikh, yani now, look, I'll read this to you. The unquestioning support is a product of, I mean, this is what's happening on the Pakistani streets. Like some of the things that you were mentioning, it says here, the unquestioning support is a product of public fury at U.S. orchestrated disappearances, of which there has been hundreds in Pakistan, and deep skepticism about the American account of her capture. Few Pakistanis believe a frail 5'3" 40 kg woman could disarm an American soldier. Fewer still think she would be carrying bomb booklets, chemicals, and target lists. But there are critics too, who are right now, they're silent. A Musharraf era minister with previous oversight of Siddiqui's case told me that it was all full of bullshit and lies. So, I mean, it seems like even the Musharraf government ministers knew that all of this is lies. I mean, it's coming from his mouth. He's saying this is all full of bullshit and lies.
Well, look, Brother Shirazi, let me put it to you this way. Let me give you another infamous example of the war on terror and the deceit which has been displayed by the Pakistani regime, and indeed the American government as well. We all recall the incident of Raymond Davis when he was captured in 2010 in Lahore. So up until that point, the Pakistani government vehemently denied that there were any CIA operatives, any Blackwater operatives operating throughout Pakistan. But when this man shot and killed 2 Pakistanis on the streets of Lahore, and he was caught and apprehended, that lie, that deceit was blown open. We could see the lie being exposed at that point. And the Pakistani regime, instead of trying, so now they've extradited Dr. Aafia Siddiqui on allegedly shooting an American soldier who didn't even die. But when an American CIA operative like Raymond Davis can shoot and kill 2 Pakistanis on the streets of Lahore, he's not actually tried and punished in Pakistan, but he's actually given a safe exit and whisked away back to the safe haven of America. Look at the difference.
I mean, they were given.
Look at the deceit. Why should we believe the Pakistani regime in anything which it says? Why should we believe anything which the American government says? This lie was readily exposed. It was perfectly exposed with the incident of Raymond Davis. And like you said, many hundreds of Pakistanis have been picked up and sold for thousands of dollars. The American regime, the Pakistani regime, they are complicit with one another. they have illegally abducted, tortured, and in my opinion, killed many people. We just don't know about these people because we don't know what's going on. We don't have the power or the ability to see what's going on. But there is no reason why we should believe them what they say about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. We have many cases, many incidents where these lies have been continuously proven to be exposed, and Raymond Davis is a very good example of that.
So now, Sheikh, when the family comes here and the family is saying that, look, there may be some type of a chance that she could be freed, things like this. There might be slight chance. I'm not sure what that really means. What is the reality of this, Sheikh? I mean, when the Americans conveniently, as you said, okay, they put it on the Pakistani government. Is that because? So you're saying they already know what the answer from the Pakistani government is, so then that's how they can kind of put it off. Let me ask you this though: why do they? Is it her education? Is it obviously a very smart woman? Her work is being utilized, her paperwork, her PhD that she did on cognitive neuroscience, on teaching children how to teach, basically, is a whole
imitation, learning through imitation,
and it's being utilized in AI and things like this. Akhi, what do you think the reality is? Is it that she knows too much now, and that's dangerous for an educated woman of that those qualifications? She what is the concern? Why not let her go?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to state that the Americans are the ones who are controlling. They're the ones who are the boss. It's not the Pakistani regime. The Americans wanted to release Dr. Aafia. If they wanted to release Dr. Aafia Siddiqui to serve out her prison sentence somewhere in Pakistan, they could do that tomorrow.
That's one of the requests. Okay, fine. Just send her to Pakistan.
Yeah, they could do that tomorrow. So just as quickly as they could expedite Raymond Davis in a matter of days from Pakistan, in a matter of weeks, they could very easily send back Dr. Aafia Siddiqui if they wanted to do that. So that's the first point I think we should understand. The second thing is, you're right. Dr. Aafia Siddiqui has seen the dirty secrets of the American and Pakistani regimes. That's actually the real issue. So if she were a highly intelligent, I'm assuming articulate woman, if she was to be released tomorrow, she would actually tell the world actually what's actually happened with her. It would actually be highly embarrassing, both not just for the Pakistani government, the Pakistani regime, but also for the American government. So this image that the Americans like to present about their concern for human rights, concern for democracy in Pakistan, representative government, that would actually all go out the window. That's actually one of the other main concerns. It would actually expose their dirty lies, their dirty secrets about extraordinary rendition, about torture, and it would bring all of that to light, actually. And that's what they're actually trying to hide, and that's what they're actually trying to cover up by keeping Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, not just in America, but in solitary confinement, where she has very limited access to people around her. Even when you mentioned her sister, Fawzia Siddiqui, visited her just a few days ago, she was not even allowed to actually physically hug her sister after 20 years. Yes. Can you imagine that? You're seeing somebody after 20 years, when she saw her sister, her front teeth had been knocked out because of assault in the prison, in the Supermax prison. But this is the tyranny, that the cruelty of the American system, that they wouldn't even actually allow the two sisters to hug each other. That's the context. That's what we're talking about here.
I'm gonna come back to the story, but Sheikh, when we look at, for instance, how intellectuals, scientists, for instance, of the highest caliber, I think Dr. Khadir, the father of nuclear weapons in Pakistan, and many others. Why is it, Akhi, that majority of these type of people end up in jail in Pakistan?
Well, you see, unfortunately, Brother Shirazi, the issue is that they actually don't toe the regime's line. This is actually fundamentally one of the problems that the Pakistani regime faces. So rather than facing political dissent, differing political opinions, it likes to claim it's a democracy. Supposedly, democracy empowers freedom of speech, the ability to dissent and protest. We're actually seeing that dissent and protest is not actually present under this democratic dispensation that we see in Pakistan. So when people like Dr. Abdul Qadir, when they actually don't follow the official narrative, rather than actually confront and tackle the political ideas, they would actually lock up the person and confine them and put them and throw the key away. That's what they would actually really like to do. And that's what they've done with Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. I'll give you another example of this. Naveed Bhatt, he's a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir. He's a spokesman in Pakistan. He's been missing for nearly 11 years. He was abducted in May 2011 while he was trying to drop his children off to school. He was abducted in daylight in front of his wife and his children. Nobody has heard or seen of him again in those 11 years. And he has been abducted by the Pakistani regime. This is how this regime operates. If you disagree with the ideas of Naveed Bhatt, if you disagree with the ideas of Hizb ut-Tahrir, take him to court, put him in a court of law, bring the evidence. What is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you find that he's done wrong? And the answer is that they can't actually confront those ideas, because people like Naveed Bhatt, he's a political activist, he's an Islamic political activist, he believes in political Islam. They know they don't actually have any real evidence. So instead of presenting evidence in a courtroom, it's easier for them to abduct somebody like that, an innocent man, completely, he poses no threat to anybody in a physical sense. The only threat that he actually posed was in the political sense, that he could actually challenge the Pakistani regime, the failures of the democratic system, the torture sites in Pakistan, the collaboration of the Pakistani regime with the American government in the war on terror, the occupation of Afghanistan. That was actually the real threat for the Pakistani regime. And this is why they have to resort to these abductions, to this torture, to this extraordinary rendition, and to actually removing these people physically from daily political life in Pakistan. That's what we actually
would it be I don't know how to put it, but is it, from what I'm doing my bit to study Pakistan's intelligence and Indian intelligence and how they're operating, especially after the Imran Khan situation, and of course Afghanistan, all of this. When you're reading, when you're asking questions, would it be correct to say in some ways that majority of Pakistan's journalism, or at least media, works for ISI specific?
Well,
especially the journalists. I'm seeing that a lot of them have very deep connections with ISI. They, if not, they're gone. I mean, like that brother. I don't know if his name is Arshad. I think it is the recent one that was killed. Arshad Sharif brother was executed. Looks like in Kenya.
Yeah, it was a brutal execution that took place in Kenya, and so by all accounts, many people believe that the Pakistani regime has made an example out of Arshad Sharif. So this was a man who was actually a strong PTI supporter, apparently, in his shows, and he wasn't towing the line. So whilst the ISA may not directly control what's actually going, the channels themselves, it has a very strong behind the scenes control. It exerts a lot of influence, through money, through threats. And when journalists don't toe the line like Arshad Sharif, then they get eliminated. It's as simple as that. So, and we see this now even with Imran Khan. He has now been, his speeches and his statements now, his coverage of him has been blacklisted. He cannot be shown on TV. So this notion that this democratic system in Pakistan enables free speech, free media, this is actually false. It's another lie, which has been concocted and propagated by the Pakistani regime. What we actually see is a carefully controlled narrative, which they try to carefully craft, and they try to project and push their narrative. But a regime which actually resorts to these kinds of measures, where it resorts to threats, where it actually resorts to abducting its political opponents like Naveed Bhatt, that's not actually a sign of a strong regime. That's actually a sign of a weak regime. It's afraid. And it's afraid of the truth. It's afraid of its ideas being challenged in the political domain. And that's why it actually resorts to these measures.
So, Sheikh, when you have people like Naveed Bhatt, I mean, obviously he's also a political prisoner. He's been in there for now almost 10 years, if not more. What is what's the parallel here? What's the similarities between Sister Aafia, who's also a doctor, and then someone like Naveed Bhatt?
Well, the first parallel is simply the injustice of the situation. So,
although one is in the US and the other one is in Pakistan.
we believe so in Pakistan, but we don't know where Naveed Butt is. Nobody has seen him alive after publicly. After it's been 11 years since somebody last saw him publicly. We don't even know if he's alive, let alone if he's still in Pakistan. For all we know, he could be in some American black site somewhere around the world. We don't know that. So there are
that's
lots
what I
of
want to know. What is the? I mean, he didn't kill anyone. He didn't bomb anyone. There's nothing against the man. They don't have anything, to prove nothing other than some of the things that he was saying. I mean, is it that these regimes, whether it's Pakistan or the U.S., have they become so bankrupt that this is the only thing that they can now resort to? Take out journalists, take out political activists.
Well, I think the Pakistani regime has always been bankrupt intellectually, and it's proven that now politically as well. The reason why it treats people like Naveed Butt the way it does, because it's afraid of the ideas that people like Naveed Butt carry. The idea of having one ummah, the idea of having a khilafah again. So it's afraid of these ideas. The notion that we should be ruled by the Quran and Sunnah. The fact that democracy has failed in Pakistan. Look at the situation, the plight of the people today. People are in poverty. They're struggling to put food on the table. So how can anybody say that democracy is working in Pakistan? It isn't. And the fact that Naveed Butt was very strong in exposing the Pakistani collaboration with the Americans in the war on terror, not just in Afghanistan, but on the Pakistani side of the border as well, in the tribal area. So the Abbottabad raid, which allegedly killed Osama bin Laden. Naveed Butt called out the army chief at the time, General Pervez Kiani. He called him out. He said that you've collaborated with the Americans, and that's the real reason why he was picked up and punished for that. So somebody who speaks the truth, he's been punished for that. And when you see what's happened with Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, the illegal abduction, you see the same parallel there. In Dr. Aafia Siddiqui's case, at least we've seen her. She's still alive. We know she exists. We don't even know that's the case with Naveed Butt. So it's the whole injustice, the tyrannical way that they've been treated, the abuse which has been, the abusive manner in which they've been kept, in which they've been treated. There are many parallels in that. And, the Pakistani regime is at the heart of that. It's complicit.
So, no, what could I mean? Do you see the possibility of her release?
It's difficult.
I know it's hard to say, of course. But
yeah, I'm not going to. It's difficult to say what would happen, but I think realistically speaking, I don't think the Americans are going to release Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. I don't think it's in their interest. If she was released tomorrow, Dr. Aafia Siddiqui just simply knows too much. The way she's been treated, I think that would be highly embarrassing for the Americans if Dr. Aafia Siddiqui was to, the next day after release of her arrival back in Karachi, Pakistan, if she was to sit down at a press conference and then talk about how she's been treated by the Pakistani regime, by the American government, I think that's just too highly embarrassing for both regimes.
I mean, I'm not saying that the family will do that, but there has been always, whenever they release prisoners, there's always contracts signed that, okay, you will not say this, you will not say that. I mean, just for the sake of her release, at least to go back home, I don't know if the family will be able to do that even, because when I was listening to her sister speak, she was very obviously there's a lot of anger, and she was saying that look, she had the Pakistani passport in her hand, and she actually pulled it out, and she said there was a time that we used to be very proud of this. And we believed that this actually meant something, and and she was talking about Islam and things, and then she said, now we know that there is no dignity in Pakistan. And then Yasir Qadi, which was very interesting, when he started his talk, he said there was a time when for one woman, Muslim armies would be moved in order to go and free. It was surprising for me to hear him say something like that, where whether it was a woman who was in prison in India, you had Muhammad bin Qasim was sent, and then if there was another, Mu'tasam Billah was sent, Mu'tasima, for instance, the whole famous story of. So obviously very Islamic leading family, very conservative family. What has kept her story alive, Sheikh, so far in the last 10, 15 years of all this struggle? What do you think it
I
is?
think it's, I think it's the sheer injustice. It's the sheer injustice of the way she's being treated. She has three children who have now grown up.
Well, one of them
It's
is
the
missing, Suleiman.
it, he's missing as well, and it's the injustice. And Dr. Afia Siddiqui has come to symbolize what's been the worst excesses of the war and terror in Pakistan, led by America. This is what
Mm.
she has come to represent. She has become the lightning rod as far as the worst of the worst, what we've seen in terms of the abuse that has taken place. So, and you've touched that on a very critical point. Yes, the Khalifa Mutasim, when the honor of a Muslim woman was violated, he sent an army to rescue her, to avenge her. But here, the Pakistani regime, instead of protecting this Muslim woman, they are actually acting as her abusers, as her jailers. They are complicit. They're the ones who've actually enabled it. Can you can you imagine the difference between the two? It's the difference between heaven and earth, between night and day here,
Mm.
between our Khalifas of the past and our current tyrannical rulers that we see in the Muslim world today, especially in countries like Pakistan. So, Dr. Afia Siddiqui is the focal point of the abuse that has taken place in the war on terror, at least as far as many Pakistanis are concerned.
Sheikh, it seems like the Pakistanis were giving, um, visas left and right to American journalists, American soldiers, American spies. It was very well known. I mean, it was, and it seemed like at one point the U.S. even threatened Pakistan, saying that we actually they had control of certain air. I guess they had rights on the flights and things like this. How much control does America have on Pakistan, Sheikh? Like when it comes to not only I'm not just saying as a powerful country, but I mean it seems like Pakistan is more than just a, a country that is willing, willing and dealing. It's more like master and slave relationship.
Hey,
There's
it's a master and slave relationship. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So it wasn't just visas that were being issued to Americans for them to go to Pakistan. They had whole bases given to them. The Shamsi Air Base, the base in Jacobad, the drone strikes. Many
yes,
of these were running out of Pakistan themselves.
a
So they
100,000
have air
flights
corridors.
hits from Pakistan over to Afghanistan.
They even today they have the air corridor
Yeah,
extending into Afghanistan, known as the Boulevard, to the American pilots, where they can run and they can have overpass rights. So the Pakistani regime, forget visas. They've given over whole territory. They've given over, effectively their sovereignty over parts of the country. This is how slavish these people are. So, and there is no relationship between equals here. This is a purely master and slave relationship between Washington and Islamabad that we see. And part of the problem here is that the regime, in the interest of its own survival, in the interest of loans from the IMF, is willing to bend over backwards, willing to do anything which the American government asks of the Pakistani regime. And this is why we see what we're seeing today.
so Sheikh, is this, let's say, within the soldiers, the armed forces of Pakistan, do they ever think about these things, what's happening? It's not like, but I understand that how much information they can actually have. I'm sure there is huge controls on what these soldiers can read. But I've heard like with this with Imran Khan situation, there's a lot of support for Imran Khan in the army. And then, of course, now there's all kinds of craziness going on within the army. They're being replaced, so whether they're soldiers or even seems like the general, like the one in Lahore. What do you see the future of Pakistan, Sheikh? Where is this thing going? Is this going to get worse? Do you see some type of a light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I think it's important to put the current situation into context. Imran Khan and his PTI party are being taken apart by the army leadership now. But let's not forget, it was the army leadership which actually put his PTI party together and brought him to power. Back in
Mm.
2011, I believe, in the elections that were held, he just won one solitary seat, and that was his own. He was actually a political nobody. And then all of a sudden, in 2013, he started to develop political momentum. Politicians started joining his party. People like Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who now are having bitter words with him. Even today, reports been published. So these electables suddenly started joining his ship, as it were. And so those same people have now deserted him. They've deserted him because the ISI, excuse me, they helped to bring his party together. They actually brought it together. They created a third political force in this act of political engineering. And now that it doesn't suit their interests, they're now breaking it apart. And I think what we're seeing in Pakistan in terms of Imran Khan, I think there's actually a split to some degree within the establishment. I think there are those who like Imran Khan, his political message, his narrative of about a Naya Pakistan, a new Pakistan. And I think within the rank and file within the Pakistan army, there are a lot of people who subscribe to that. However, the old guard, in terms of the feudals and the industrialists who are represented by the Pakistan People's Party, the Pakistan Muslim League led by Nawaz Sharif, they have their strengths, they have their bastions, their strongholds in Pakistan, and there's the establishment is now leaning towards them. They believe that they can serve their interests best, because I think Imran Khan to some degree was a loose cannon to some extent, and he wasn't following what the army leadership wanted, so they've replaced him, and that's what's actually taking place. So in terms of what the future brings, I don't actually see a very a bright future for Pakistan as things stand. I think if this democratic system continues, I think you're just going to see this political instability. You're going to see poverty. Many people in Pakistan suffer because the democratic system in Pakistan is a failure. It's failed to solve the people's problems. And until we don't see a radical change where we see this corrupt democratic system removed and replaced by what Islam shows us, which is a khilafah, which we've always had for many centuries. That is actually the precedence. There's no precedence for man-made rule via democracy, where these people who can buy their way through elections with their money, often which has been obtained through corrupt means, where they can actually buy votes, where they can actually stand in elections, and they can then, after, once they've had the voting, they can sit in parliament and they can enact laws and legislation and regulations which serve their interests. That system has failed the people of Pakistan, and if we want to see any hope of a better future, we have to work to politically remove this corrupt system, work with parties like Hizb ut-Tahrir who are working for real political change within Pakistan, people like Naveed Bhatt who have literally given their lives for this peaceful political change. That is the only way that you're going to see real change and hope for the people of Pakistan. Otherwise, I see a very dark future.
Last two questions, Sheikh. One, regarding this whole thing with Sister Aafia, Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, do you think that the military, I really hope that she is released, that if she's not, let's say if she is released, do you think that the army is trying to score political points? We brought her back home under our...
It's possible. It's entirely possible, because like you said, that, we don't know what agreement may be reached, but certainly if she was ever released, then the Pakistani regime would claim that as a victory. They would certainly try to demonstrate that we're the ones who got Dr. Aafia Siddiqui released, we brought her back on. They would definitely use that, the army leadership included. But the elephant in the room is that, let's not forget, it was the Pakistani regime, it was the army leadership under General Pervez Musharraf who sent her there in the first place.
But so that maturity to understand that political maturity, that clarity is there in the minds of the people to understand that this is another game, but everybody understands that. Well, maybe they do now, at least, but that the army is trying to score political points.
I think the army, has a very shallow mindset when it comes to politics in Pakistan, and it thinks that this can serve its short-term interest. But people are not stupid. People understand that it was the army leadership under General Pervez Musharraf who actually, renditioned Dr. Aafia Siddiqui in the most brutal manner. Let's be clear about this. So the people understand. A lot of people understand that the regime is actually is not the victim. It's not the shining white knight in armor which has come to Dr. Aafia Siddiqui's rescue. It's actually complicit. It's actually the abuser who's actually enabled this to happen in the first place.
During her talk, her sister, Dr. Fawzia, she said, since her arrest or since her rendition, her kidnapping, it's been that she said it's surprising that we felt so alone, even though we are a billion people, we are it's whole ummah, billion Muslims around the world, but we felt so alone. There's no one that came to help us. And second, she said that, no matter which way we turn, no matter to whoever we turn to, they just looked the other way because it was just not convenient for them. It was just not in their interest. It was just not. Even though she said, now I'm speaking, obviously people are willing to hear us and all of this. Sheikh, what's going on with this ummah, akhi? What has made? I mean, it's in many ways we are also complacent in these crimes.
It's very sad to hear that the fact that Fawzia Siddiqui actually said those words.
Yeah,
And
I
it,
mean,
and
it
indeed,
was man. I
it's
was just, I was just listening, and she said, even though I'm telling you, and she was speaking to a lot of people. This is epic. Is a big masjid in Dallas, and for her to speak in front of that many people, and she just said, it's I was just, even though I was just listening to the lecture, I was so embarrassed that a sister had to say that to the whole ummah. She said billion, but we were so alone.
it's very sad. I mean, and it's hurtful, and we can only imagine the trauma that the family has gone through. And first and foremost, this is a trauma not just for Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, but it's a trauma for her family as well. They
Of
they are
course.
they are the ones who have suffered, and they're victims as much as Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. And this is indeed a path and a journey that they have been forced to undertake alone. But what I would say is that, you know, there are many in the Ummah who have not forgotten Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. This is why her issue remains alive to
Yeah,
this
she
day.
also
This is
mentioned
why,
that. That is one thing she mentioned. She
this
said,
is
I
what,
just want you to know that it's not even Afia. There's so many who are not even known. Go ahead, Akhi. I didn't want to cut you off, but I
absolutely.
just wanted to quote her.
No, absolutely. But this is why her issue remains alive in the minds of many Pakistanis and indeed many Muslims around the world today. This is why her issue is still being talked about today. What I think she where blame really lies is actually with the rulers who have the power to do something, the rulers of Pakistan, the rulers of the Muslim world. They are the ones who've actually failed, not just Dr. Afia Siddiqui, but many Muslims in so many ways. Whether it's the people of Afghanistan, whether it's the people of Kashmir, whether it's the people of Palestine, indeed, whether it's the people of Xinjiang. Indeed, it's the whole ummah around the world, even ordinary people in countries like Pakistan who can't put food on the table. It's these rulers who have actually failed uh, the ordinary Muslims around the world. It is these rulers who have failed Dr. Afia Siddiqui. And inshallah, they will be held to account by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al Qiyam, on the day of judgment, when
But Sheikh, let
everybody
me
will
look.
stand.
When obviously I understand that Imran Khan is a political figure, that is different. But when he went to jail, he was just in jail for 2 days. Half of the Pakistan, well, at least Punjab and Punjab province and Peshawar was burning until they had to release him. Is it, Sheikh, that people like Dr. Afia and Naveed Bhatt, they don't have that kind of the ummah does not care for such people, or does not see or share the vision that they have? What is it that makes, obviously, and as I said, he's a political, public, international figure, so obviously he gets that attention. But why do you think the others who just the ummah does not move for?
Well, I think we need to be careful here,
Okay.
Sheikh. So, in the case of Imran Khan, he's been projected on national TV day in, day out for the last 10, 15 years.
Mm.
How many times have we seen Naveed Bhatt or Dr. Afia Siddiqui on the national televisions, in Pakistan? Hardly any, I would say. Certainly not in the case of Naveed Bhatt. And with Dr. Afia Siddiqui, it's an embarrassing acknowledgement now and then. So there's a huge difference in the perception that many people may have. Secondly, I think I would say with Imran Khan's case, I would also be careful because the incident of 9th May actually serves the narrative that the Pakistan Army is now putting out, which is using to justify the crackdown on PTI. So it's not that I think that the Ummah is heartless. I think it's just the way things have been projected. Imran Khan has been given a lot of coverage over the many years. Indeed, he's been the ruler of Pakistan for about 3.5 years.
Mm.
So I think we need to put that into
Sure.
in context, into balance. The Ummah the Ummah is concerned. It does care about people like Dr. Afia Siddiqui, and I'm sure if they understood the plight of Naveed Bhatt, they would also be concerned about that. It's about raising awareness. It's about making people, telling them about what's happened. But when people do learn of that, they do feel saddened. They do feel emotional, and they do want to try to do something to help the plight of people like Dr. Afia Siddiqui and indeed Naveed Bhatt as well.
SubhanAllah, Sheikh. So, I mean, it was heartbreaking, Akhi, for them, for because her children now. I mean, both of them are doctors. It seems like the older one. Well, yeah, two of the kids are doctors. Sulaiman is actually missing. He was 6 months old when until today they don't know what has happened to him. Uh, Sheikh, I mean, again, this would be the last thing. Uh, it seems to be a very, very educated family as a whole. There seem to be even the sister is a doctor, she herself. Uh, is this the case in Pakistan that Sheikh, a lot of well-educated families are very conservative? They love the deen, they want the deen, and then they're being made examples of. I mean, just like even Naveed Bhatt, man was a master's from University of Chicago here, UIC.
I think there are a lot of people in Pakistan, both rich and the middle class, and indeed the poor, who are very Islamic. I think a lot of Pakistanis are Islamic. That's not to say that there are others who are not,
Meaning that they're
equally
worried
who may
about the
not be Islamic.
influence of such people in the society.
Yes, they are. They are definitely worried about that. There's a small, vocal, secular, liberal minority in Pakistan which actually is in control at the moment. That's actually the real issue. So when they see, it's not in the interest to see Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. You mentioned why do the people not care? Because they're not going to project Dr. Aafia Siddiqui in the press, in the media on a regular basis, because that undermines their whole secular narrative, their whole liberal ideas, their whole liberal democracy, their relationship with the American government, their the slavish mindset that the Pakistani regime has. So it's not in their interest to empower people who are Muslims, who celebrate their deen, who are practicing Muslims. It's not in their interest to do that. So I think they do feel that. They feel that pressure. They feel that political pressure that the Muslims of Pakistan are inclined towards Islam. They would like to see the Quran and Sharia being implemented and to live by their lives by that under a state which implements the Quran and the Sunnah. So definitely, I think that's very much a factor in play here.
SubhanAllah. All right, Sheikh, with this, first of all, Jazakallah khair. This is an amazing session. Actually, it was a lot that I learned. SubhanAllah, do you have you ever faced any kind of threats when you're writing for these newspapers? Did you ever get any calls, anything from anyone saying you stop writing such things? Or
No, I've not faced any personal calls when I've written such documents, but we live in the world at large, and we take one day at a time. We never know what may happen to us, but we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our protector, and we're going to return to him, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, mashallah. May Allah protect and preserve you and people like you. And journalism is a very big, Sheikh, these are people who are enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. This is one of the things that journalists are supposed to do. These are people who are playing a very major role in creating awareness for the Muslim Ummah and bringing the realities in front of them so that they make moves that are understanding. So, because subhanallah, when I'm seeing that the amount of journalists that are being just disappearing, it's beyond belief. Subhanallah. All right, Sheikh, Jazakallah khair for coming and giving your time. Inshallah, we may have to come back and discuss what's happening depending on the development that takes place here with Dr. Aafia, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your time, Sheikh. And for the rest of you brothers and sisters, Jazakumullah khairan for
thank you for having me.
Jazakumullah khairan for attending, for inshallah watching. Just see what's happening. If you don't know who Dr. Aafia Siddiqui is, you need to get to know who this sister is, and our responsibility for this sister. And also, there were some calls made. People were asking that, look, we have to create some type of awareness for her conditions in the prison, and we have to speak out that even though she's in prison, she does have rights. So please, brothers and sisters, whatever capability that you have, that you can write to, that you can create awareness regarding her situation, please do. She is our responsibility. As Umar ibn Khattab, he used to say that if we have to sell the resources of the whole ummah to just bring free one prison, we will do that. One prisoner from the hands of the kuffar, we will do that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free her and bring her back to her family. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل همام، نحن فينا عمر، لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل همام، نحن فينا عمر. صبح بدا نور ظهر، نجم وشمس وقمر، ألقى على الدنيا الدرر، هذا عمر هذا عمر. كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر، كي تستفيد من العبر، هذا عمر هذا عمر. لا لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح، نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا عمر، لا لا لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح، نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا عمر.